Today I'm going to show you how to change the color of an eye in Photoshop. Hello and welcome back everybody. And to get us started off here, first what I have is a stock image that I got from DeviantArt, and I will leave a link down below in the description if you want to follow along with me here. Now, while there are a few different methods of how to change a person's eye color in Photoshop, I'm not going to go into every single one of them. I'm just going to go through one, maybe two different methods, and then you can choose for yourself which ones you like, and you might even be able to mix them together to get a few different kinds of effects, going from the natural to the supernatural and just some outlandish color extremes that don't look realistic anywhere. But it's all personal taste and what you prefer to use for your image. Now with this image here, the first thing that I want to do is make a selection of the iris and the pupil, everything that contains the color within. So I'm going to grab the ellipse tool and I'm going to bring those crosshairs to about the center area of the pupil, and I'm going to click and drag outwards while holding down the Shift and Alt keys until I get almost a perfect selection. If I find that I'm a little off, which I do seem to be here, while keeping the Shift and Alt keys pressed down, I'm also going to press down the space bar. That allows me to move the entire selection around before I set it in place, get it to where I want it to be, releasing the space bar, and then continuing with the selection. If I still find I need to move it more, I can always go back to the space bar, but right about here is just fine for my needs, and I'm going to release the mouse. And now that I have this selection, I want to first use an adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to this little symbol here down at the bottom right, and for the adjustment layers I'm going to choose curves. And what we're going to do here first, once I have the curves adjustment layer panel opened up here, I'm going to click along the center of this line. I'm going to click that and drag it upwards a little bit until we get to see the change in the brightness within. Now that serves a couple of purposes. One, I get to see a well-defined area of where my selection is, so I know it's good for what I need to do right now. And I know that I'm going to want to blur these edges. I don't want it to be so sharp, but we're going to get to that next. What I do want to do before that is click outside the mask here, somewhere, anywhere along the layer itself. So the layer is selected and active, and then press Control G to put that layer in its own group. And you could change the name of the group if you wish, but we're going to leave it as Group 1. Now everything that I do to change the color of the eye is going to be kept within the confines of this group. And to further control how much area we will be affecting, I'm going to take that mask from the adjustment layer, left click and drag it up until you see the Group 1 layer is highlighted, release the mouse, and now that mask affects everything within that group. So every adjustment to the curves, as I'm now dragging it around, you see it only stays within the mask that is now part of the group. But I do want that blur, so I'm going to reselect the mask itself and then go to Filter, Blur, and Gaussian Blur. And depending on the size of the image that you use, you might want a higher radius. The bigger the image, the more fine the resolution. You're going to want a larger radius. But for this particular image, a radius of 9 pixels works just fine. So I'm going to click OK. And now I know that I have a nice, well-defined and fuzzy around the edges selection. So I'm going to go back to the curves and let's bring that back to normal. We may adjust that later, so just click that spot you've been using and just quickly drag it off the screen. It'll snap back to its original place. Now we're going to get to the fun of it. We want to add an adjustment layer for the colors. So we're going to go to Hue and Saturation. And from here you can enjoy dragging the hue slider back and forth and watching the changes occur within the eye to your liking. You might find some colors a little bit not what you would be going for, but you could go through the entire spectrum, and because the eye did have a couple of different colors originally, let me turn off the visibility there, you'll see it was a nice pale blue, and it's got some sort of yellowish, maybe a little brown tint closer to the pupil. That will cause the color to change all throughout the eye for both the blue and the yellow, brown, orange tint. And you may not want to have to concern yourself with two sets of color changes at once. If you want to go a different route, you can click the colorize little box over here, and that will change all of it to the hue of your liking. Until you find what you like, we'll say a green here, but you're going to want to bring down the saturation some. You don't want it to be too overpowering unless that's an effect you're going for. And adjust the lightness as you need, but when you do adjust the lightness, you're going to notice that it doesn't affect just the color. It affects everything, including over the pupil and some of the shading under the eye. Now, you can clear that out with a mask, but I think it's a lot better to work with just the hues, the saturation, and if you need to adjust the lightness of it, you can go back to the curves layer, and once again click around the middle there and drag it up or down as necessary. And going back to that hue saturation layer, now you can add more color effects to this eye with more adjustment layers. Like say I wanted to add back in some color around the pupil area. I'm going to go back to the hue saturation here and add a brand new hue saturation adjustment layer. And we're going to go to colorize. Let's find ourselves a, we're going to be a little outlandish here. We're going to go for a nice dark blue. Take that saturation down just a little bit. And because we have the mask here selected for this layer, press Control I to invert that to all black, which will completely mask out the blue color we added. And now we grab a brush and find one that's the right size we want. I'm going to go with like a 45 pixel soft edge brush. And now I can paint back in. Oh, I must make sure that my foreground color is white. I'm painting white on this black mask here. And now I can paint back in some of that blue around the pupil. And I know this may not exactly be a realistic color match for a few people, but I'm just showing you how you can play with the different colors here. And that is one way to bring in a couple of different colors in the eye. And because they are adjustment layers and still all working within the mask of the group, I can go back and change these colors to whatever I might need later on. Like I'm going to go for that yellow. Let me bring up that saturation a little bit more. And then I will go back to the green of the iris underneath, and I could change that hue and bring it to whatever color this might be. I mean, you can mix and match and play with your colors as necessary. Get more fine detailed within some of the fibers of the iris if you need to. You can also use this to change some of the color around the edge of the eye, knowing that it's always going to be within the scope of the mask for the group here. If I wanted to, let's go with another effect here. I'm going to turn off the visibility for these two layers, leaving the curves as is for now. I'm going to create a whole new layer within the group. And now that I have that brand new blank layer selected, I'm going to go with a color here. And I'm going to go with a very bright yellow this time. But let's bring up the brush size a little bit. And because of the mask for the group, if I paint outside the eye, you won't see anything appearing, but you do see it on the little layer thumbnail there. But now I paint over the iris, and you will see that it only affects what the mask allows it to affect. And then once I have that color yellow in there, one of the other ways you can play with the color of the eye is paint over exactly as I've done here, and then choose a different blend mode, like hue, or color is a good one, but you might want to bring the opacity down quite a bit to have a bit more of a realistic blend, as realistic as a pure yellow eye can be. But you get what I'm saying here. Now you can also, like I said, mix and match the different types of effects. I can now turn on some of the colors underneath and see them come through in their own way. Once again, changing the colors from below. If I take that to a blue and bring up the saturation some, it changes everything entirely. And same as what was just around the pupil there, I can do the same and bring that color to blue. And because of the blend mode of layer 1 above being on color at the moment, everything underneath will be affected by that blend mode. And once you have the color that you desire, I'm going to turn off this yellow here, I'm not crazy about that, but once you have something like, say, this here, if you wanted to work on some strange alien or cybernetic eye, once you have the colors that you need, you might want to also check out the fact of the mask for the entire group itself. Notice there is a bit of an overlay underneath the iris and above, and it's just as simple to get rid of that by switching the foreground color to black. Let's bring down the size of that brush a little bit. Yeah, go 45. And just brushing out the area above the eye and underneath it to get rid of some of that extra bleed through of the color you don't want on the eyelashes or the eyelids themselves. So just mask them out. And if you find you need to mask out a little bit of the center, if you find some of your color has bled over into the pupil or any reflections in the light, you can do the same thing and just mask out the parts you definitely do not want colored. So, changing the size of the brushes, I can now mask out over the reflection of the lights, if you feel it's necessary. Now, one of the reasons to have the curves adjustment here, I'm going to turn these two off for the moment, is when you are working with a darker eye, like say you start with an eye that is a deep dark brown, that might be a little bit harder to adjust the color realistically. You would have to lighten it first. So the good, we'll call it the base coating for this effect, is to always use the curves adjustment first, so you can click and drag from that center to lighten up the eye, and then once it's lightened from its dark brown or dark green color, then you can start to do your color adjustments a little bit more easily. And also it's a good layer adjustment to have within your group, because there'll be quite a few times you'll find that no matter what color adjustments you make, there might be some need for a little tweaking when it comes to the brightness. You can always stand to have an eye darkened a little bit or lightened just a little bit, depending on the needs of the image that you're working with. And there you have one of the different methods for changing the color of an eye in Photoshop. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And if you want to be notified of new videos as they come up, please feel free to subscribe. Don't be afraid of that subscribe button. And until next time, I'll see you next time.